Good morning. It's so fun to be back with you, and I'm excited you've got a candidate you're interested in, and I'm assuming she's interested in you. Great news, and I know the whole process is divinely guided. Yeah, I was here a couple months ago and did a metaphysical Bible interpretation, and some of you came up to me and said, "Oh, it was so good to hear metaphysics. I've needed that." So I decided we're going to do a metaphysical exploration today, but not of a Bible story. We're going to do the story of the Lion King. How many of you are familiar with the general storyline? Okay, well, we'll talk about it a little bit as we go. How many of you have seen the stage play? Amazing, isn't it? I've been twice. It is probably one of the most incredible theatrical productions I've ever seen. The first time we went, I was just totally enraptured with what was unfolding on stage, with the puppetry, with the presentation, with the music that just lifts you up. We went a couple years later with some young nieces and nephews. Two things happened. At that production, my 5-year-old nephew was sitting on my lap, and I had to hang on to him for dear life because he was so enthralled with what was going on up there. He kept almost tumbling off my lap. I had to hang on tight to him. But as we watched this play unfold, it suddenly hit me. This is a metaphysical Bible story, or a metaphysical story. It's the story of you and me and our unfolding spiritual journey. And as the play unfolded and as each new character came to the stage, I was realizing, oh, there's a spiritual teacher, and there's our intuition, and there's our adverse ego. Do you want to know how it all fits together and plays out? I'm excited to share it with you. The story opens with Mustafa. He's the big Lion King at the moment. He presides over the savannah. And all is well and prosperous. Everyone is happy, living together in peace and harmony. And Mustafa and his bride have a little lion cub, Simba. Simba's an adorable little thing. You know how little animals are, how they trip over their own feet and tumble and fall? Mustafa is darling. He's young, he's naive, but he's eager to please his father and eager to learn because he gets that somewhere down the road he will step into his father's position. Well, watching Mustafa on the stage and watching him nurture and guide little Simba, I thought, this is Mother, Father, God. Mother, Father, God, that teaches us, that protects us, that guides us on our spiritual path. And Simba, hey, that's you and me. Wherever we are in our spiritual journey, that is you and me. We're here to learn, we're here to grow, we're here to be more than we ever imagined we could be. I thank you. So Mustafa is teaching young Simba the ways of the savannah, the ways of his impending kingship, if you will. And as he leads Simba here and there and teaches him different things that Simba will need to know, he points off to the Shadowland, an area of shadows and darkness, and he says, that's a place we don't go. That's not a safe place. Do not go there. How many of you ever had a toddler in your house? What happens if you tell them don't go there? That's exactly where they go. Well, Simba and his little lioness cub Nala are frolicking through the savannah and at some point find themselves rather near the Shadowland, and of course they have to check it out. So they venture into the Shadowland, and before too long they're surrounded by hyenas whose only purpose in life is to destroy them. And they are trembling, quaking, because here they are, these little lion cubs hardly know how to stand and walk, and here they're faced with this mob of hyenas that are about to do them in. And Mustafa, loving father, shows up and saves the day and hauls them each off by the scruff of their neck and takes them back to the savannah land. Now, Mustafa, being the loving and wise father, takes Simba out behind the woodshed. He explains to Simba, who's already halfway figured it out, that he's blown it. He didn't listen to what Dad said, and it nearly cost him his life. Well, Simba feels very badly. He realizes he's messed up, and he's going to do everything he can to prove to his dad that he can be the son that his dad wants him to be. There's another character that shows up in the story about now, Scarface. Scarface is another male lion, but he's not king of the pride. Scarface is Mustafa's brother. Scarface would like to be king of the pride. And the arrival of this little toddler, Simba, has just ruined any idea he ever had of ascending to the throne. Scarface is not real fond of Simba. Mustafa and Simba venture out one day, and they're exploring another part of the savannah. And Scarface gets involved. There's a canyon that Simba and Mustafa are in, and Scarface incites a stampede of wildebeests. And as the stampede bears down on them, Mustafa boosts Simba to safety. And as he attempts to leap to safety himself, Scarface shows up and makes sure he doesn't make it. And Mustafa tumbles down into the canyon under the thundering feet of the herd and is killed. And Simba runs down once the herd is past, and he tries to revive his father, and he can't. And Scarface comes over and he says, "Oh, Simba, your father's dead, and it's your fault. Run away, run far away. You don't belong here anymore. It's your fault. Your father's dead." Who do you suppose Scarface is? You know, we know in metaphysical Bible interpretation that each character represents some facet of ourselves. So we have to stop and ask ourselves, what part of me is Scarface? What part of me is all about controlling everything in life and getting what I want, no matter what it does to anyone else? Well, Charles Fillmore would promptly point out that's adverse ego. We even might want to call it our human ego. Our human ego will do everything it can to get what it wants. It will stir up trouble in our life. It will make things difficult and complicated. Adverse ego thinks only of itself, first, foremost, and always. And it doesn't matter who gets run over or stampeded in the process, as long as adverse ego gets what it wants. Well, Scarface / adverse ego set up the situation that Mustafa is now gone, and then he banishes young Simba away from the savannah land, and now adverse ego takes over as king. Our human ego wants to be in charge of our lives. Our human ego doesn't want us to grow spiritually. Our human ego is actually pretty much at odds with our spiritual being. And our human ego wants to win. So it will stir up all kinds of trouble. And the more life is stirred up, the more we have a tendency to pay attention to what's being stirred up, to the material things in life. Haven't you noticed it's kind of easy sometimes to forget your spiritual tools when life gets messy and when ego stirs things up? Scarface is counting on this. He stirred things up with Simba and told him a lie. Told him that he was responsible for his father's death and he had to run away and never come back. Simba runs away. He winds up way far away from the savannah, hanging out with a meerkat and what was the other creature? I can't remember. They hang out. And that's where the wonderful song, Hakuna Matata, comes from. Hey, everything's cool, let's just hang out. There's nothing to worry about, no responsibilities, everything's hunky-dory. I'm sure in our lives, we've never adopted that attitude, have we? Well, maybe for a minute here or there. But as the story unfolds, Simba's off and hanging out with his buddies and growing up. There is a moment, this young teenage Simba and his friends are talking about where they came from. And Simba remembers a story that his father told him, that all the stars in the sky represent all of the Mustafas, all of the kings, all of the divinity that's gone before him and is there to guide and inspire him. He remembers that story. And as he lays down to sleep that night, he has a dream. And in his dream, he looks up in the sky and sees the multitude of stars. Sees, if you will, Mother, Father, God watching over him. And in the play, in the movie, if you've seen it, as this scene unfolds, the smattering of stars slowly coalesces into an outline, into a picture of Mustafa. And the message Simba hears is, remember. Remember who you are. That's our call, people. To remember who we are and to live from the divine within us. Well, Simba wakes up and he's contemplating his dream. And now we get to meet another character in the story, Zazu. Anybody remember Zazu? Zazu's cool. Zazu is a parrot, very colorful, long plumes, colorful feathers. Zazu is kind of excitable. Zazu shows up, there's always a lot of activity going on because that's just Zazu. Zazu shows up to help remind Simba of who he is and to come back to the Pride Lands and to take his rightful place as king. You have a Zazu in your life. You have Zazu within you. It's called intuition, or what I like to refer to as the voice of God within me. Have you ever noticed when you're kind of off your spiritual path that naggy little voice tends to crop up and say, we belong over here, not over there? That's Zazu reminding you to come back to the truth of who you are and what you are. There's another character in the story. This one I love, Rafiki. Rafiki is a baboon. Rafiki is another wonderful, colorful character. And Rafiki's like the tribe's shaman, the spiritual leader. And it's interesting how it plays out from here, because we notice that Rafiki has been holding Simba in higher thoughts, in prayer. And Zazu shows up trying to remind Simba who he is. How wonderful that you and I have the zazu of intuition, and we have Rafikis in our life, holding that higher vision for us. You want to know who your Rafikis are? I can tell you who a couple of them are by name. Reverend Audrey Peterson, I know, holds everyone in this congregation in prayer on a regular basis. She is your Rafiki. Your prayer chaplains, they are your Rafiki, holding you in prayer no matter where you are in life. They are holding higher thoughts for you and helping call you to be more than you can imagine. One of my Rafikis is my mother. I know she prays for me every single day. And you probably have some Rafikis in your life too. Be grateful for them, because they are the ones that, when we're fallen down and downtrodden, they still hold the higher vision for us. And they even dispatch zazu on occasion to remind us of the truth of our being. Oh, Simba's hanging out with his buddies, but Rafiki's holding that higher thought for him, and zazu is showing up to say, come on, Simba, this isn't who you are. You are the son of the king. And Simba gets it. He finally gets it. Although part of his problem is he's still feeling badly. He's feeling guilty for disobeying his father and going into the Shadowlands. And he feels guilty because Scarface told him he was responsible for his father's death. But that higher truth moves him even beyond those things and brings him back to the Pride Lands. And there the showdown occurs. Simba goes face to face and head to head with Scarface. And they wrestle and they tumble and they stumble, and eventually Scarface is off the edge of the cliff in history. That's part of our spiritual journey too. You and I at various times in our life are called to square off with our human ego from the perspective of who we are as a spiritual being. And hopefully, as in Simba's case, who we are spiritually will win out over our human ego. Simba returns to the Pride Land. And something happens that doesn't get presented on stage or in the story, but I know for a fact it happened. And it can't be on the stage or in the storybook, because what happens next is Simba has to do his deeper spiritual work, which is typically a very private process. I just know in my heart, when Simba returned to the Pride Land and defeated Scarface, that Rafiki showed up and said, come on, Simba, we have work to do. And she took Simba off to a quiet place to do the work of self-forgiveness. You see, we can't step into who we are fully as God's magnificent creations while we're feeling guilty, while we're holding ourselves responsible for what we may or may not have done, for our mistakes, accidental or deliberate. That keeps us separate from the God in us. That keeps us separate from a full expression of who we are. So what does self-forgiveness look like? Well, it looks a whole lot like forgiving someone else. There are a couple basic steps. First, to become aware. Oh, I'm feeling guilty about this. I'm feeling sad about what I've done. We may even be beating ourselves up for some of the mistakes we've made along the way. All we need to do is take a moment and recognize, ooh, that's not who I choose to be. And certainly that's not who I want to continue to be. From that moment of awareness, we can step into the moment of power. And that moment of power is simply the thought, the willingness to forgive, Mother, Father, God, I let myself off the hook. I forgive myself my mistakes and errors. And you know, one of the coolest things about forgiveness, whether it's self-forgiveness or forgiving someone that's hurt or offended us, is all we have to do is be willing to forgive. Give it up to Spirit and allow Spirit to work the miracle of forgiveness in us. Now, we may have to do a couple other things. If we've done things for which amends are required, absolutely we need to make amends. Another thing we need to do is, once we've done our forgiveness work, let it go. That was yesterday, that's history, that's past. The circle of life keeps unfolding, but it won't unfold if we keep going back to yesterday's mistakes. Be aware of what needs forgiving. Be willing to forgive. Allow Spirit to forgive through you and in you. Make amends if it's necessary, and let it go. Rafiki and Simba, I'm sure, were off in a little cave doing this forgiveness process. And when it was complete, now Simba is ready to step in to who he really is. The son of the great Mustafa, or to spiritual seekers, the son and daughters of Mother, Father, God, created for greatness, each in our own unique way. And he takes over the Pride Lands. Scarface, human ego, has left it devastated and desolate. But when Simba steps into his rightful place, he's able to restore the Pride Lands, and once again, it's prosperous, and all the animals are living together in peace and harmony. And Scarface reconnects with Nala, his childhood lion cub friend. Boy, that's another whole story we won't even go to today, but Simba's the divine masculine and Nala's the divine feminine. And guess what happens when they get together? Another little lion cub comes into the world. Another little lion cub is also about the circle of life. This new little lion cub, this child of Simba and Nala, is all about a new beginning. When we do the work of self-forgiveness, when we let ourselves off the hook from yesterday's mistakes, when we fully embrace who we are, remembering that we are the sons and daughters of Mother, Father, God, that is a new beginning. And it can happen every day, a dozen times a day. That new beginning is represented for us by a little lion cub. But new beginnings can take place all the time in the circle of life. You didn't know that was a spiritual story, did you? You just thought it was just some fluffy little kid's fairy tale. But those children's stories so often have a powerful spiritual lesson for you and me when we take the time to step back and look at them and allow Spirit to reveal to us what's really there. Whatever you've done in the past, that's history. Forgive yourself. Remove that barrier between you and God. Remove that barrier that separates you from the you that you were destined to be. And then remember. Remember who you